Warning: the following video may be classified by self-proclaimed, allegedly unbiased, independent fact-checkers. Proceed at your discretion.
I didn't wake up one morning and said, you know what, I am bored. Let's just yell at the cops. Let's just yell at some people because I got nothing better to do. No, what I see is a repetition of history. I'm trying to shake the population into an understanding that this is a repetition of history, that those boys and girls are acting like Gestapo.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back. I hope that you're ready for this. I had the absolute honor of having a conversation, doing an interview with Pastor Artur Pawlowski, maybe the most famous Canadian on the planet during the COVID era. Had just a blast asking this man some questions, listening to the wisdom, listening to his story. And I think that this conversation is something that every Canadian needs to hear. You have to listen to what this man has to say, where he's coming from, and how he's piecing together what he knows from his past to what's going on right now. This is probably the biggest, most important conversation that I've been a part of, and I can't wait to share it with you. So please sit back and enjoy.
All right. It is my absolutely esteemed honor to be having the opportunity to speak with my guest at this time. I think he might be the bravest man in Canada, quite honestly, and a shining example of how important freedom is in this country and to what lengths it is worth defending that. I think you're maybe the most popular pastor on the planet, Art, and I couldn't be more thrilled right now. Pastor Artur Pawlowski, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Art, there's so much to cover when it comes to your story. I think that your justifiable defiance throughout this pandemic, the way the Kenny government has targeted you, has really put you on the map globally. But really, you've been on the receiving end of injustice for much longer than this. If I'm not mistaken, as far back as 2005. So if you don't mind, can you kind of take us back there, describe that situation, how this kind of all started with you back then?
Sure. Let me just take you back a little bit further.
Sure.
I grew up in Poland. Poland is a very peculiar country because it's in the middle of Europe, and it seems historically that our neighbors constantly would like to try to take it over. So I grew up learning about the history of Europe, history of my country. And of course, I was born under the boots of the Soviets, under communism, socialism. But I was always hearing the stories from my grandparents and from the older generation about the Nazis, about the Gestapo, about the SS. And I have been many times in different concentration camps when I was growing up. And when the city that I grew up had a concentration camp during the Nazi era, and as kids we were playing in a bunker. So anyway, it's important to understand the background that I have grew up in a country that was seen atrocities of totalitarian regime, police state, dictatorship. So growing up under the boots of the Soviets, it was no fun. It was absolutely horrible. And eventually my parents decided that it's enough. And they moved to Greece. And of course, they took us, me and my younger brother, David. We emigrated through Turkey to Greece, and we started a business over there. We were quite successful. But again, We did not have a citizenship in Greece, and everything was done, kind of under the table, and we didn't have immigration status. And when Canada opened its doors, and I will never forget that meeting in Canadian Embassy when the officer said, come to Canada, sell your business, sell your cars, come to Canada. Canada is the freest country on earth, and no one will ever persecute you for your faith in Canada. And we were debating, because our El Dorado, if you will, was Greece. We were making lots of money there. We were building houses for the richest people on earth, their summer homes, and we had the powerful friends, and it was pretty good, except we didn't have the legal status that we wanted to have. And the desire to live in a country that is ruled by law and order was very appealing to us. So anyway, as a family, we made a decision to come to Canada, and we emigrated here in 1995 to start our life all over again. And at first, I have to tell you, we didn't care much about the poor. We didn't care about the homeless. We just went, worked very hard. I started business again, and it was quite successful. But God works in mysterious ways, and he was luring me to work with the poor. So my first homeless man that I took off the streets was in 1999, and I hired him into my company. Then I hired other people like him, and eventually I started to work part-time with the homeless people. But I knew I can do a lot more. I can actually save lives. I know how to do it, how to organize an organization, if you will, that will be able to do a little bit more than once a week, giving pizzas and a testimony. So 2005 came, I registered a charity organization and walked away from business completely. And behold, that's where I realized that we are in a big trouble, because we were highly successful. Within a few months, we took over 600 people off the streets. And then the police started to show up, bylaw services, all kinds of politicians got involved, mainstream media got involved. And behold, saving lives have become like act of enemy of the state. And I started to get tickets after tickets. I could not understand. The threats of arrest started to come. And I'm like, I've read the Constitution, I read the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and everything I'm doing is lawful according to the highest law of this country. And yet the police are telling me that I'm breaking the law. Mainstream media portrayed me as this troublemaker, lawbreaker that has total disregard to the law and justice, and I'm mocking the court system. It's just like I could not understand what was going on. Of course, later on, I figured it out. I have been an organization, we have been interfering with the drug trafficking business, with the homeless business, because I don't know if you know, the homeless business is that the government, which is us, we pay the shelters per head. More cattle, if you will, more money for the CEOs, more money for the shelters. Business goes like a revolving door. They need more people, not less people. Our organization was just too successful, and they were afraid that they are going to run out of homeless. So believe it or not, my biggest enemies were the very people that were claiming that they are doing this to save lives. So the shelters partnered with the mainstream media and the politicians like Joe Ceci, Drew Farrell, a mayor at the time, Dave Bronconnier, and they sued me. They took me to court, and they wanted me to be imprisoned for saving lives and feeding the poor. Anyway, fast forward, it took 10 years of me fighting, over 100 court cases, 11 arrests, if you can believe it, in for simply feeding the poor, preaching the gospel. Laws that I was told that we were breaking was giving free goods and services. Giving free goods and services. So if you give a sandwich to a dying child on the streets in a public area, you are committing an offense. And this law is still in the books, and Canadians don't even know it. Also,
I didn't know that.
I was charged multiple times with illegal distribution of printed material. Did you ever, have you ever heard of such a thing? A distribution of printed material. Unbelievable. Bibles, gospel tracts. My Bibles were confiscated by the police and the Bible services. And we're talking about 2005, 2006, 2007. So my fight, it didn't start with the COVID lie. This communism, socialism, fascism hybrid, I have been fighting for the past 17 years. I have become the first Canadian citizen to be arrested for publicly reading Bible. No amplification, just to 6 of my parishioners peacefully in a public park, Tom King's Park in the city of Calgary. I was handcuffed, arrested, 7 criminal charges were placed on me because I was reading the Bible. Fast forward. 100 court cases, 11 arrests, over 300 citations, tickets, provincial court, criminal court, QB, Queen's Bench. Anyway, 10 years later, 2015, I won my last fight. We made a peace with the city hall, and for a few years, I had no problems until 2020, when they have found a new way to introduce Canadian population to communism full force. And again, as you know, I became the first Canadian to get the COVID ticket, $1,200. And then I was threatened with 12 officers, health inspectors, bylaw officers, that I will be arrested if I will not stop feeding the poor. And also I was threatened with millions of dollars worth of tickets, which later on I did receive. I appealed it to the mayor. I appealed it to the ministers. I appealed it to the Premier Jason Kenney. At that time, I was hoping that he is a normal, decent man. I didn't know that he is part of the globalist takeover, a distraction of our democracies. So I thought maybe he will help me out. Of course, he did not. There was not even a reply. From City Hall, I was told we're in the middle of greatest pandemic. I have to stop feeding the poor. I reasoned with them. So, okay, I'll stop feeding the poor. You shut down the shelters. What do you think those people are going to do? I mean, people need to eat.
Yeah. What did they say to that?
Nothing. There was no reasoning. You see, the whole COVID hysteria, you're not allowed to question anything. You're not allowed to have a debate. You're not allowed to follow science, even though they tell us to follow science. So when we do, they shut us down, they deplatform us, and they hunt us down, just like the Nazis of old. Anyway, I was told to stop feeding the poor. I refused. So I end up with 40 COVID tickets and 5 arrests when I refused to shut down the church. My record from the 10-year war, I call it, from 2005 to 2015, was 33 police officers and 11 police cars. In 2020, for my crime of doing a Christmas festival with AAA steaks and caroling and giving gifts to the poor, I had over 100 police officers, SWAT team, chief of police, 52 police cars, and as you know, I end up with 15 more tickets. And then they started to come to our church building, and that created another craziness. And I'm sure you have, and like many millions of people around the world, you've watched the video. Yes. When the Gestapo of today, a uniform gangsters, I call them, broke the criminal code 176, 1, 2, and 3, and they invaded our church, breaking the criminal code. And I just told them to get out. That video, and if you would tell me at that time that that video will be the #1 played video on earth for Easter weekend, right, I would say you're absolutely crazy. And it turned out it was watched over 1 billion times, and it spread like a wildfire, and they came back with a vengeance. I mean, vengeance. It took me over 30 times to tell those gangsters to get out, and a few weeks later, SWAT team came back to our church, and then ultimately, me and my brother David, we were arrested in a sting operation of a takedown of El Chapo of Canada. in the middle of the highway. We were arrested and spent 3 days and 2 nights without sleep. They would not allow us to sleep on concrete, and then faced charges where later on we were found guilty of, even though it was the authorities that broke the law, not us. They have managed to find crooked judges, and that's the problem we are seeing right now. Crooked judges, that Judge Rook, for example, that gave them order, gave them power to arrest anyone, children, men, women, it didn't matter, in the entire province of Alberta. And also another crooked judge, David Gates. And I don't know if he's related to Bill Gates, but David Gates of Alberta gave them the power to use any force they deemed necessary to arrest me anywhere within the city of Calgary, if I dared to not allow them to break the criminal code of Canada. So ultimately, I got arrested and faced trial. Judge Germain, another crooked judge, has given me a compelled speech. I don't know if you heard about that compelled speech. The judge ordered me or hired me by force to become a CBC reporter or CNN reporter to tell the lie. So right now, this interview, before I could even talk to you, the judge ordered me to read a statement that masks work, vaccines save lives, and the rhetorics that we're seeing left and right. And me and my brother, we just said, there's no way we're going to submit ourselves to this totalitarian regime. We can't. We're not liars, and we refuse to lie to the public. So
they tried to turn you into a mouthpiece for them to spread their lies.
That's right.
So you come to Canada, you're helping the poor, but without knowing it, I guess you're interfering in this criminal, black market type criminal activity, and that's getting in the way of their making money and stuff. So they start targeting you. It's a 10-year battle that you go through in court, and for all of that, you come out on top. You're found not guilty for any of these things that they've been attacking you for a decade. Is that fair to say?
Well, you have to remember, they almost finished me off financially. I lost millions of dollars fighting this regime. And, to understand the problem, the province of Alberta designates over $200 million a year to fight, in quote, homelessness. And at that time, they implemented the 10-year to end homelessness. Of course, I was a very strong advocate against it because they were just trying to push money, millions of dollars, actually over $1 billion, $2 billion into this, telling the public to give more money, so they're going to end homelessness. And I said, it's not going to happen. It's just a cash grab. It's a lie. And of course, I was right, but I became the enemy of the state because, again, I started to ask questions, just like I started to ask questions if it comes to the fake pandemic. So where is the money, I would say? I had my TV show, I was on the radio, I was writing, for different newspapers, magazines. I would ask, where is the money? You're talking about $200 million every single year just for 2 big cities in the province of Alberta. So where is the money? CEO of Drop-In Center has twice as big office as the mayor of Calgary, lives in a $3 million mansion. Where is the money going? Because I know, I work with the homeless and they're telling me that the money does not end up on their plates. So I have become a threat to their enterprise, if you will. And now it's a repetition of history, because now I have become a threat to the new lie, the new narration. Right. And the COVID pandemic has been used as a cash grab, and the politicians are using this to just give each other bonuses and left and right, stealing what's rightfully belongs to Canadians. Nothing is new under the sun, and that's the plan that they have chosen. Unfortunately, not enough Canadians realized what's going on, and that's why it took 2 years of them, politicians, pillaging and destroying our economy, shutting down our businesses. So, lately I see more and more Canadians are rising up, and more people's eyes are being opened to what's really going on in their country.
I agree. And, I just want to talk real quick about that viral video. So that's April 2021. And, you obviously showed no sign that you were being intimidated at all. You stood tall in the face of the Calgary police. You used some carefully selected labels for these guys. You called them communists, fascists, Nazis, Gestapo, brown shirts. And, as I was watching the video, I was absolutely stunned in a good way. I was so proud to see someone standing up to these guys, telling them like it is, but not everyone thought so, right? Because obviously here in Canada, there's a great many people who still don't have any idea what's going on. They're absolutely asleep at the wheel. They don't know what you know because they haven't experienced what you've experienced. And for me, the number one reason I wanted to have this interview with you is because you have a perspective that is completely foreign to many Canadians. You lived through totalitarian, tyrannical government before, and you can see the clues that many sleepy Canadians can't see. And so I'd really like to ask you to talk about that, to talk about, where you come from, where the circumstances, what they were like, what you and your family were put through, the parallels you're drawing on that to Canada now, because I think that many Canadians have lived a very comfortable, very unchallenging existence, and they need to hear from someone who's seen this movie before and that can link the past with the present.
That's right. It's not just the clues. Now we have evidence of them acting like the Gestapo of old, like the KGB communists. So here is what I observed growing up under communist dictatorship, and what I've heard, the after effects of the Nazi invading Poland. So their tactics was always fear, intimidation, harassment, terror. It was like a blanket of terror, terrorizing people, threatening them with arrest, threatening them with consequences. At first, when you know history, you know that communists and Nazis were not murdering people at first. I mean,
right,
maybe somewhere in a back alley, I'm not disputing that, but openly. They were not creating concentration camps at first. Those things came later. First, they were establishing the fear and terror. They were coming, and first they were beating people up, shutting down protests and rallies. If you know the story of Adolf Hitler, you know that he was always fighting physically, beating the communists, beating anyone that dared to have any protest or any rally, any public voice. According to those guys, no one else is allowed to voice their opinion if it's contrary to their opinion. Communists are identical. Nothing else is allowed except their propaganda. So when I started to see, and I had the evidence that nothing else is accepted, allowed, no debate, no reasoning, no, you were not allowed to ask questions. You had to just blindly accept the rhetorics of those lying politicians and the mainstream media. I knew right away we're in a big trouble. This is a dictatorship in the making. This is a police state. This is a totalitarian regime. When I was growing up in Poland, you were not allowed to even listen to a radio outside of the communist bloc. If you were caught with a pamphlet that was contrary to the party line, if you will, you could be arrested, tortured without trial, and then sentenced in a show trials. In other words, they already sentenced you before you even appeared before the courts. It was just for the public. It was to terrorize the rest of the people, telling them, you see what we do with those we disagree with? Look at that, Pastor Artur Pawlowski. You see what we can do to you? Do you want to be another Pawlowski, where you will be dragged, arrested in the middle of the road with a huge amount of force by SWAT team, and we will not allow you to sleep for days, and then we'll charge you with ridiculous charges like inciting people to come to church, officiating an illegal gathering, participating in illegal gathering, while at the same time Muslims in the mosque across the country could have thousands of people. No one ever bothered them. No police, no bylaws, no health inspectors, no tickets, no arrests of imams. Only Christians are not allowed to congregate, and anyone that has any form of patriotism. So when I started to see all of those things, I said right away, this is a simple repetition of history. They are just like copy paste, copy paste, copy paste what the totalitarian regimes did before. So the use of language, I didn't wake up one morning and said, you know what, I am bored. Let's just yell at the cops. Let's just yell at some people because I got nothing better to do. No, what I see is a repetition of history. When the Germans would invade places of worship, the communists would have total disregard to the places of worship. They would just walk in and arrest preachers, arrest, pastors and priests, arrest nuns. Germans murdered thousands, tens of thousands of priests, pastors, and nuns just because they didn't like the mercy, the love behind religious institutions. As you know, majority of the churches aligned themselves with the Nazi party, and they had swastikas flying outside their churches because they were terrified. They were terrorized. They were afraid that if they will not play along, they're going to be hammered and sent to Dachau or Buchenwald or Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camps. And we got to remember, because I think people forget, that the first victims of the Nazi party were not the Poles. Because, we know the Germans attacked Poland as the first nation, but that's not the case. The first victims of the Nazi party were the German people. Germans were the first victims of the totalitarian regime. Hundreds of thousands of German people were murdered by the Nazi party before Hitler attacked Austria or Czechoslovakia and Poland, before he went on the pillaging endeavor around the world. So good German people, good pastors, good clergymen, good patriots that opposed the Nazi party were the first victims. And people forget that Stalin murdered more of his own people than others. Mao Zedong murdered more his own people than others. We have to understand that those types of individuals turn on their own people first. And that's what I'm trying I'm by the use of words, I'm trying to shake the population into an understanding that this is a repetition of history, that those boys and girls are acting like Gestapo. What is Gestapo? Gestapo was the Nazi secret police. Mm-hmm. So they're acting like Nazis. And if you were paying attention, the police officers changed their uniforms from blue to black, almost black, just like the Gestapo, just like the SS. And this craziness has been in the making for a very long time, because instead of looking at the police officer and saying, why, he's my rescuer, and that's where my hope will come from, now people look at them and they're terrified. They're afraid. Mm-hmm. What is this man is going to do to me? I've done nothing wrong, but I'm afraid, because those people have total disregard to the law and order. They're cooking stuff up. They're going to pile nonsense charges on you if they don't like you. And that's exactly what happened to me. All of those charges are bogus, made up, cooked up by the corrupted politicians charges. They're not real charges. And yet, like the crime of the Jewish people just being Jewish, and the crime of the German people that simply oppose the totalitarian regime, that was their crime, but they were piled up with bogus charges like enemy of the state and treason, and Jewish people were, of course, treated as a second-class citizens. They called them the virus that need to be eliminated. All kinds of different stuff they they accused those people of doing. Of course, it was all lie. So that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to shake Canadian society into, hey, you may not see what I see, but to me, it looks almost identical to what I learned from my grandparents and what I have seen during communism. Yes, true, they are not shooting us dead on the streets yet. Yes, it's true that they are not breaking our arms and legs, but now my latest story is that for the 50 days that I was in prison, I was being tortured by those people against the law of this land. And now I can, before my arrest, the latest arrest, which was my 16th arrest and 5th arrest during the COVID lie, I would say, well, they're not torturing us yet. Now I can't say that because I was tortured by those people. The presumption of being innocent was thrown out the window. I was already punished for the crime that they said I have committed. I was placed in metal boxes. I was given a concrete treatment. I was stripped, searched, naked, subjected to all kinds of cruelty, solitary confinement, which is by the international standards a form of torture. Inmates were incited to murder me, to beat me up. The guards said that they're going to keep the doors open, and if they will do me, then they will get incentives. When I was kidnapped from Calgary and shipped to Edmonton, I was placed in solitary confinement again in a max spot for the most dangerous offenders, murderers, alone in the entire unit, alone, and the freezing and conditioning in -20, that I was shivering all day and all night, could not sleep. And when I complained, the guard said, I guess at least you've got fresh air. And he was laughing. So that's torture. Then I was taken into a psych ward. And if you know anything about communists, you know that they always dealt with the political opponents by putting them into a mental institutions. And that happened to me. They put me in a psych ward. Why? Because they were hoping that when they put me in a cell with a schizophrenic that saw stuff when I was there, like, he had some visions, he's going to murder me during the night hour. So they were hoping that I'm going to be hurt by some of those inmates. It turned out that I was very popular over there. I started church services, prayers, and people were coming to me for blessings. So that didn't work. However, the psychological torture was very real. A doctor comes to me when I was there and he says, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "That's a good question. I do not know. I was taken, stripped naked, then again taken to another unit. No one told me anything, and here I am. They locked me in a psych ward without explanation." He says, "You're not supposed to be here. Only we, the Alberta Health Services, is allowed to place people in this unit. And the administration went on top of us and they placed you here." So even the doctor, the AHS were puzzled what's really happening to me. So that's pretty much in a nutshell, a summary. And all of this has been done to me because I dared to speak. That's all. My crime, everything that they have been piled up has nothing to do with law and order. I'm a law-abiding citizen. Everything that they have been cooking against me is to do with me feeding the poor, in other words, saving lives, which I should get medals for it, and the government grants, not courts and tickets and harassment, intimidation. Right. And also for me speaking, encouraging Canadians not to commit acts of violence or pillaging like Black Lives Matter and, let's just blow up the city hall or let's just blow up, police station. No, during my speeches, I would always say, this is a civil disobedience, non-compliance, but peaceful. No guns, no swords. We are not violent people. It has to be solidarity style movement. It has to be Mahatma Gandhi way, Martin Luther King Jr. during civil rights movement way, peacefully, non-compliance, a refusal to cooperate with the tyrants. That's what I'm telling people. Canadians, rise up, wake up while you still can. Do not allow those elected officials to steal from you what rightfully belongs to you. And for that, I have become extremely dangerous. The Crown Prosecutor, during a trial for the bail hearing, he called me extremely dangerous, and the judge agreed that I have to be locked in prison, because if I am going to be unleashed on Canadian public, it's going to be a disaster.
All right, guys, I'm going to stop that there. There's a lot more that Art and I talked about. So follow me into part 2. Please share this video out wherever you can. I think this is really an important conversation. People need to hear what Art's talking about, so please share it out and follow me into the next video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that and want to see more, hit the like button and feel free to leave a comment and tell me what you think. This content can be found on BitChute, Gab, Brighteon, Telegram, Rumble, Parler, Odyssey, and the Highwire. So please follow, subscribe, and turn post notifications on so you can know when the next post drops. Thanks, and see you soon.